Big time lightweight action in the respective second times out. We have the former FEN lightweight champ putting his 14-fight unbeaten streak on the line. It's Rabisty Mateusz Rumbeski, and he's taking on the former two-time PFL lightweight finalist Tajik Tank. It's not the Jaguar paw anymore. Loic Radzhabov out of Killcliff FC, and Southern Florida really represented in this fight. Killcliff with Radzhabov, American top team with Rabisty, and if you consider it for Rumbeski, training with some big-time fighters over there. Sweet Prince, Marlon Moraes, one of them.
Oh,
but if you look at it for a guy like Rumbeski, it's got to be awkward because you're the hotness out of Poland at lightweight, but also a guy that you fought at ADCCs is also there in Mateusz Gamrot. So a couple of big-time Mateusz's out of that gym. Is that the plural? Is it
well, we were just both really surprised Rabishki had to fight Allen Contender Series before he came into the UFC.
Yeah, it was really one of those Albert Duraev type situations. And for Rumbeski, when he was on Contender Series, fought a very interesting fighter that should honestly be in the UFC in Rodrigo Lidio. And he had the no-hook side crank rear naked choke. I'll throw the picture up there. It was wild for Rumbeski. If you go back and you look at this win streak, beating really good fighters over with FEN, fought the... Well, I guess due to inactivity and the injuries, he's no longer the KSW lightweight champ. But Marian Zilkowski, now it's Saladin Palnas, that double champ. But if you look at it for Rumbeski, his last time out, he was supposed to fight a much better fighter than Nick Fiore. He ended up getting Fiore on short notice. It was originally supposed to be Omar Morales. And in that fight, Matt, Rumbeski gets the win, looks great in the first round, but Mateusz Rumbeski had to fight his last time out like Arman Tsarukyan just had against Joaquim Silva. You look at the win, it's great. You look at the third round, it's great. But Rumbeski didn't look great against Fiore.
He got tested a lot more than we both kind of originally thought.
He was so tired at the end of the first
And that was surprising to see because I really thought not only the work rate, but along with his takedowns, his striking, like he's a well-rounded fighter. And he does have a good gas tank. So I was really surprised to see that because I thought it was going to be one of those, maybe not huge mismatches in a debut, but you get what I said. I just said it in the previous video. Some people make their debuts.
He was a minus 750 favorite in that fight. It should have been a thumping.
Exactly, but it wasn't. And that's what gives me a little bit of hesitation in this matchup against Radzhabov, because how many takedowns did Loic go for and complete in his last fight? It was in the double digits. I believe it was 11 by the time the fight was over.
11 of 21.
Exactly. If he has a similar game plan in this fight against Rumbeski to where he's going for high levels of takedowns, and I'm not saying the numbers are going to be the same to where he's completing 50%, but if he can make him work for those 20 attempts, I'll be curious to see what the gas tank of Mateusz looks like in the later parts of this fight, because Radzhabov, is a guy who will just not stop going for them.
He has dog cardio too. Both these guys have awful cardio.
But at least when he goes for a lot of those mat returns, because I will say a lot of those takedowns will kind of be he's maintaining the position, he's going back down, he stays dedicated to it, and I do think that's a wearing attack, that's all.
Well, we talked a lot about Loic Radzhabov before his UFC debut. He also came in on very short notice, yet he was replacing a fighter, and he took on Esteban Ribovics in a very interesting fight. Ribovics gets a knockdown in that one, but we have a lot to say about Radzhabov, so let's throw it on over to that. Because you talk about a guy with a finishing rate, and I know it's not to the 100% like a guy like Ribovics, but it's because Radzhabov's fought a very high level of competition, and even in his last fight, you'll see the asterisks on the screen. It was a short notice catchweight fight, super lightweight against Zach Zane, who's fought for Ryzen, Contender Series.
He's been around.
He's fought with Bellator. He's fought with Titan. Zach Zane has been around. Loic Radzhabov went in there and said, He goes for the takedown. Zane gets him in that really weird Kimura lock. What does Radzhabov do? Flips out of it. Exactly. He ends up in a good position. He gets the finish against Zach Zane. But Radzhabov, you know him for the wild looping hooks. You know him for the heavy power. You know him for his power bar. We're going to talk about power bar later on this card. Yes. Marc-Andre Barrio, a guy who stays steady throughout his fights. Radzhabov tends to burn hot. And then he goes down a little bit.
That's a bit of an issue.
5-round fights, not as much. It's been weird. But for Radzhabov, all gas, no brakes. You hate to talk about it. But you had Gilbert Burns coming out on Twitter not that long ago in the last couple of weeks defending Loic Radzhabov because it seemed like he'd be one of those veterans that would end up on The Ultimate Fighter, like Austin Hubbard, like Brad Katona, who's on the season. There are a lot of these, Jason Knight's another one of them, that was going to end up on that season.
Roosevelt Roberts.
Did McGregor bring in his own guys? Did he not? We don't know. But all of a sudden now, Radzhabov goes from Aliyev makes that debut, has all the fans behind him, and then that next day or in that 24 hours, Rajabov's in the UFC, and he's getting an opportunity against a very, very hype prospect.
It is a difficult fight for him, but here's the thing about Rajabov. It will be interesting to see how he progresses in the UFC because his strengths are very obvious, but he does have some obvious weaknesses as well. He kind of fights like more high-volume Dan Henderson to a certain degree. He is very high up with his boxing stance, and he's not a huge kicker. He'll throw a light kick every now and then, and I would say he has become more of a kicker as his career has
They do
progressed.
a lot of damage. As it's progressed,
Exactly.
they have done damage.
But he doesn't really go to the body or the head, and he does have to get close to get a lot of his effective damage done. Now, and you brought it up too, when he's able to implement the takedown into his game and get on top of his opponent, he is a very damaging grappler, and he's an intelligent grappler too, because he's not just good in those set positions that we all know, the full guards, the half guards. He's someone who is comfortable with scrambling and can be comfortable in uncomfortable positions. And I know that might seem like a cliche, but it's a very nice skill to have when you're making your UFC debut. And that's why I am happy that Rajabov doesn't have to take the Ultimate Fighter route, because he's too good to be on the Ultimate Fighter, for being honest. Now,
a lot of those guys are.
Exactly. I know this season they might be doing a new twist or whatever. They're bringing back former fighters, but Rajabov has fought some very good fighters in the past. You had brought it up. His level of competition is very good, but the thing about Rajabov is if you're a high-volume fighter with a lot of long-range attacks who has good takedown defense, and I know I'm starting to build up a pretty good fighter right now, but there's guys like that who exist out there, and there's a lot of them in the UFC, you can start to gain offense against him at distance, and I will be curious to see if Rajabov can continue to progress at the UFC level, because he is still in his early 30s, but he has been fighting this way for a while now, so I'll just be curious to see if he can implement some more of those longer range weapons, because I think once he is able to do that, that's really going to be able to kind of finish out his skill set.
And if I was able to use Dana White's wording and my own verbiage, I would say Luik Rajabov, the kid's shop worn, because if you look at his fights, he hammers the shots, and he does tend to tire as fights go on, but he fights at a high pace when they start, and he really does like to go for the grappling. And you look at some of his takedowns, he'll do a body lock to then trip. He'll pick you up and throw you. Like, he is a bit of an unorthodox takedown
He
artist.
has a good chin, I will say this. He has been cracked by some good shots in the past, and he has been able to stand up to them.
His fight IQ is very good because when he gets hit, he then tends to wrestle. He's kind of like a Michael Chandler in that respect. Not that he really does fight like Chandler, but you go down through Rajabov's record, 7 wins by knockout, 5 by submission. The only losses on his record are by decision. One against Hausch Manfield. That was in the 2021 PFL Finals. Now,
that was a good fight, too.
Yeah, it was a good fight, and Rajabov was a heavy favorite to win that. If you went by the verdict scorecards,
the higher ceiling.
Rajabov was the winner, but if you go by actually using your eyeballs and watching the fight, Manfield won 2 of the rounds.
He landed a lot of right hands.
If you look at it, yeah, Manfield landed the right hand. There were some takedowns and some scrambles in that fight. There were some big shots by Rajabov as well, and his gas tank actually held up pretty well. And Manfield, to his credit, was a super underdog to win the season. He was a plus 1,000 at the start of the year. Lost by split decision to Alex Martinez, the half Canadian. He was able to get that back on that season. He lost to Natan Schultz in the PFL Finals the season before. He has a draw on his record to Islam Mamedov, who's now, 22-2 over with Bellator. And in that fight, it was a draw. And then at the end, they went, we're going to a judge's decision as to who moves on in the tournament. And they all decided it was Rajabov, and the other lost to Rashid Magomedov. So
a good fighter, but you would never pay money to watch that man fight.
But Rajabov tends to struggle against pure grapplers and guys that can throw a lot of volume on the outside. And everybody in between, apart from that, he's able to have a lot of success against. So a lot of fun in these fights. You want to see a big highlight reel win for Rajabov. It's his win in 2021 over Akhmed Aliev, who had a great record and a great level of competition. He goes into that one. He stalks him, throws an uppercut, and then he goes, left hook, right hook. He drops him. He ends up getting the TKO finish in 27 seconds. But I mean, other than that, I can go all through the Manfield fight. I can go through a lot of these fights that Rajabov's had. It was a big left hook, right hook to the body, and then he followed it up with another hook, Ribovics, with that second round knockdown. But as you alluded to, Rajabov, first round gets the win, third round gets the win, utilizes those takedown, 11 of 21 on those. And we saw it out of Rajabov. I mean, some 5-round fights, wonky cardio, some 3-round fights, also wonky cardio. Both of these guys kind of tested in their respective last fights. So I'm eager to see what we get out of these guys, because for Rambeshki, he likes to cut the gap by throwing big power hooks, and then he ultimately gets his own takedowns. Rajabov is a little bit more creative with some of his entries. You'll see shovel hooks, you'll see odd angle counters. I love this fight, but I have a really, really hard time trying to make a pick because both guys are extremely high level to be matched up in their second UFC fights. I think this is going to be an awesome one. Rambeshki is the slight favorite in the matchup. We have a look at the Tapology vote. Surprise us there to you. You guys in the comments are going to be all over this one. I'm going to say over under 70% Rambeshki in the matchup.
I'll say over, but I feel like I've got them all wrong.
It is, I swear to you.
You've looked these up.
No, I
don't believe
promise
you.
you. I pinky
Craig, I
swear
don't
in front of the world. 614 total votes, 70% Rambeshki, 30% of Rajabov. A heavy amount have this fight to go to a decision. Tajik Tank taking on Rabisti. Who's the pick here?
The reason I bring up the mat returns of Rajabov is I think we're going to get a lot of those, not stall out positions, because both guys are going to be really active. I just think both guys have good levels of takedown defense along with good wrestling to where we're going to get a lot of those clinch spots that are really difficult to judge. But I think Rajabov's going to be the one who's at least forcing some of the fight. I think it's a difficult one to predict because I agree with where the Tapology votes, at least they're split decision-wise. I think this will probably go to a decision. Both guys are talented enough to where they don't leave those massive openings in their game plan. So ever so slightly, I will take the slight underdog.
It's going to be interesting too because a southpaw lookout of Rambeshki the last time out where you saw, Gribovic's mixing things up, throwing those hooks. That's exactly the game plan for a guy like Rambeshki. So it really is a tricky one. I will go with Mateusz Rambeshki in the matchup ever so slightly. I've been talking about Lok Rajabov for years now on this channel, so listen, sometimes you just got to set yourself on the bench, ride the pines, and make a different decision, but both of us split on this pick. I Poland Rabisti to get the win, Matt going with the recently renamed or re-nicknamed Tajik Tank to get the win. Let us know down below who you have in the matchup, because Matt, Tajikistan, they get fired up for their fighters, and so does Poland. Some big-time fights left on this card. The main event, Emmett taking on Ilia Topuria. If you're not excited, you should be. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.